Thanks everyone. My name is Tim. I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me all right, Julie? Good. So it's obviously a very international bunch today. So to quote the MC from Cabaret, Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome, and to those of you sitting there in Sweden, god kväll. So I'm very glad, very glad you're all here. I won't be speaking in Swedish though, not this evening. I'm an alcoholic. I'll explain what that means in a minute, because that sounds like really obvious to be in AA and say you're an alcoholic and to know what that means, but it's not obvious. You can say the word and not know what it means. So I'll come to that. But so my home group is, I'm in London actually, but my home group is in San Antonio in Texas. Why not? Why not? Your home group, well, I think my home group is where I go when I'm in serious trouble. But because I have a home group, I'm not in serious trouble. So it's having a home group stops me from getting into serious trouble, because it doesn't matter what's going on. When I get there, I'm all right. Even if I'm not all right, I'm all right. Even if I'm not all there, I'm there. So what's an alcoholic? Well, I was saying from my date of sobriety, by the way, I'm going to call it my most recent date of sobriety, because we don't want to tempt fate. My most recent date of sobriety is the 24th of July, 1993. The reason I say that in part is because I had a number of sobriety dates before that. And I was saying from the age of 16 or 17 to anyone who would ask why I drank so much, I'd say, like I was talking to a child, because I'm an alcoholic, isn't it obvious? And so I was really happy with the label alcoholic. It seemed, compared to the people I grew up with, the people I was surrounded by, it seemed glamorous and tragic in equal measure. I mean, before I drank, I was a kind of tragic figure anyway. So you add the drink, you add the alcoholism, it can only get better. Once you're already tragic, at least it can get kind of entertaining and colorful and interesting. But I had no idea what alcoholism was. I'm not going to give a long drunk-a-log, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is about my drinking that demonstrates I'm an alcoholic. Now, the fact is, by 1990, I was starting to have alcohol-related nervous breakdowns. And it was, I did some dumb stuff, but I wasn't stupid as a person. And I knew very clearly that alcohol was altering my personality, and not for the better. It was eroding all things worthwhile in life, and that it couldn't continue. And I made the decision to give up altogether. And that lasted 3 months. Now, when I started again, there was no serious thought about whether or not it was a good idea. It just seemed to me to be a good idea. And pretty soon I learned that even if I have a break from alcohol for a while, when I start drinking, the same thing happens. And I think I understood the principle of what it talks about in the book as the phenomenon of craving. I understood it before I got to AA. I didn't have the vocabulary for it, but if you'd asked me, I think I would have explained it thus. When I drink, I'm just built to drink buckets and buckets of gin. So a physical craving that it talks about it in the book, it doesn't mean that I sense it in my body. It means that when I drink huge quantities because I'm built like it. It's not because I'm deciding to intellectually, it's because something in me just takes over, which my mind is unable to stop. And I think I understood that. I think I understood that my two options were complete sobriety, or basically drinking large amounts every day. So that a lot of people try moderate drinking. I was neither interested nor capable. The point was to get completely drunk. I don't know if you've had these, I had a few occasions when something got in the way of the second drink or the third drink, and it was like the first drink transported me to another realm, like instantly. And then trying to come down off one drink or two drinks was like being pulled back from that realm, cell by painful cell. Just coming down from one drink was horrific. So I knocked off the moderate drinking option. I resigned myself, I think in 1990, to going through life, getting very drunk every day, or every night, in fact, getting drunk every night, having maybe periods of sobriety to cool off a little bit and make a few apologies and get things straight again, and then carry on. And I thought there would be a way of compartmentalizing my life so that I could absolutely, as they say in German, let the pig out in the evening, and during the day, scrabble everything together again to keep the show on the road. But, and that now, if I could do that, and I know people that do that, if I could still do that, I'd still be doing it. Because it's kind of a quick way of getting some kind of substitute for happiness. It looks enough like happiness to someone like me to be tolerable for a while. But so now we know one thing about alcoholism, which is that when I start, I can't stop. Fine. But the two more things I learned over those 3 years, it's progressive and it's fatal. Now, the way I learned that it was progressive, when the Titanic hit an iceberg, the iceberg, we're told, ripped a gash in the side, but there were compartments all the way along the hull, and the compartments were supposed to keep the ship afloat, so that if one of the compartments was flooded, the rest of the compartments would be fine. But because of where it was hit, this is what I'm given to understand, it started to tip up, and the water started to tip from the first compartment into the second, and then the second into the third, and then the third. And I got to a point by January 1993 that all of the compartments were flooded, in that basically my day now consisted of being drunk or getting over being drunk. I had a good 20 minutes in the afternoon to get stuff done. But until about 4:20, 4:40 in the afternoon, nothing was happening. I'd have a good 20 minutes, 5 o'clock, I was off again. It had progressed. I didn't want it to progress, but it progressed. And I found myself increasingly in dangerous situations, and increasingly being the person that was making the situation dangerous. You know, I went from being surrounded by lower companions to being other people's lower companion. That's also a progression that can happen sober too, just FYI. And it's also incurable. So no matter what I did, the way I drink is just the way I drink. And I'm pretty convinced if I drank today, because I've seen it so many times before, the fact that I've been sober for 28 years, my cells don't know that. The neurotransmitters and the electrical waves in my brain do not know that I've been sober. They'll just operate the way they've always operated. Exhibit A is what happened when I stopped smoking tobacco for 7 years and then started again. And all of the knowledge I had, I watched my father dying, or it's a very dramatic way of putting it, while I was smoking again. During that period, my father died of lung cancer. So it's not like I had any cognitive doubt that smoking was a really bad idea, but it didn't dent my smoking. It just made me feel guilty. So I've got to be really careful. When I drink on any given occasion, I drink buckets. If I start, I don't know how long that period of drinking is going to be. I don't know how long whether that bout is going to be a day or 3 months, or as it was for me, once a year and a half. I don't know. So I must never have another drink. Now, so far, so good. If you go to most AA meetings, you'll probably get a consensus on those points. But you hear something, I'm going to be a bit naughty now, going to be a bit controversial. So if you don't like people being controversial, put something in your ears, or go and listen to the Philip Schofield quiz, or there'll be something on the television. Some people say they have a choice today. Now, I don't know what they mean, because I'm not in their brain, but I don't understand that, because a choice to me means I have more than one option. There's got to be more than one option, or there's no choice. You've got to have 2 options. And I have to say, with my history, if drinking were an option, I'd be nuts. If I wanted a drink, I'd be nuts. If I've got a choice, I've got 2 options. If I've got 2 options, I'm nuts. I should not be the one making the choice. When I'm sane, there is only one viable option, which is that I want to be sober and I'm going to stay sober. When I was drinking, there was no choice. I had to drink. Now I'm sober and sane, touch wood, just for today. You have to say that. But it's true. I don't have a choice today either. Heaven forbid that choice comes back. If it does come back, I'm really hoping the training will kick in and kick me into a meeting, or kick me on the phone to my sponsor, or kick me on the phone to my best friend. Because the whole point, you see, the whole thing that happens to my body when I have alcohol is not a problem unless I drink. I can only, now this is going to be a funny old thing to say, I can only have the first drink sober. If I'm not sober, it's not the first drink. So my problem is what I'm like sober. And the best description I've ever heard of what this so-called mental obsession is, well, first of all, AA is a very difficult place to explain anything in, because most of the words we use in the big book have a different meaning in the big book than they have in everyday life. So craving, which we've talked about, doesn't mean the same thing as it does in everyday life. Mental obsession doesn't. Spiritual doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. Meditation doesn't mean the same thing. So obsession. So if I say I'm obsessed with Harry and Meghan, what that means is I think of nothing but Harry and Meghan. I've got all of the glossy magazines. I watch all of the YouTube clips, all of the documentaries. I talk about nothing but Harry and Meghan. When I've got an obsession with alcohol, that's not what it's talking about. It doesn't mean you're thinking about it all day long, you're talking about it all day long. What it means is this: it's the persistently recurring delusion that a drink is a good idea. And when it occurs to me, it overwhelms me. So let's unpack that. So the reason it's a delusion that a drink is a good idea is because I had years of horrible consequences. So it's not a good idea, but it seems like a good idea. So it's a delusion. It's persistently recurring. Doesn't mean it's there the whole time. You can not have it for a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years, 20 years. I know a poor old friend of mine who raised a glass of champagne to his 30th AA anniversary. He hadn't been obsessed in the ordinary sense with alcohol for 30 years, but the delusion that a drink would be a good idea, it's persistent but patient. It was patient enough to wait for 30 years and bang, it hits. And when it hits, it's like someone that turns up at a club and pushes past the queue, punches the bouncer's lights out and heads straight to the VIP room. So when the idea comes in, it takes over. Now, the reason this is so tricky is because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't send a calling card in advance. It doesn't send one of those little things to download onto your iPhone calendar. In 2 weeks' time, the thought of a drink is going to occur to you. So get all your ducks in a row. There won't be trumpets. And I love those stories in the big book, Jim's story and Fred's story. And people make a lot of, you can make what you want out of them. What I make out of those stories is there was no warning. And when the thought of a drink hit, there was no defense and it took over. The one thing that's interesting, though, about Jim's story and Fred's story, I don't know how intentional it is. The stories may just be psychologically true, so no one needed to have worked it out. They just said what was psychologically true and it's accurate. But what's interesting in Jim's story, pages 35 to 37, before he has the first drink, he is thinking only of himself. Fred's story, I had a sensational day. I went to Washington. Everything is wonderful in my life. I leisurely dressed for dinner. I. That's the whole point of those two stories. They're the center of their own universe. That's the problem. Because if I am in charge, if I am the highest court in the land, if I'm the Supreme Court, if I'm the House of Lords in my own life, then when that command comes through, the little bit of ticker tape which says, let's go to the pub, when it comes through, I'm going to do that. The problem is not the crazy thoughts that occur to me. The problem is me doing what I want to do when I want to do it. So AA's got this amazing solution for this, which is really unpopular. So if you're not aware of what the solution is, you might want to brace yourself. And if you think you know what the solution is, you might want to brace yourself anyway, because this could come as a bit of a shock. What I want doesn't matter. What I think doesn't matter. What I feel doesn't matter, at least not to me right now. What matters is the 4 Ps. What are the 4 Ps? Acting, what matters is how I act in my life. I've got to act in accordance with the program. I've got to act in accordance with the principles of AA. I've got to act in accordance with the higher power. So I've got to be in touch with that higher power. And when push comes to shove, ask the group, ask your sponsor and your 2 or 3 closest friends and say, hey, I'm thinking about, and then you tell them your amazing idea you had after 9 o'clock at night, and just do what they do instead, and what they suggest instead. And I can tell you, I've been saved from a self-imposed crisis more times than I can count by simply doing what someone else has suggested I do, even though I think they're wrong. When I was around 6 months sober, maybe, I went on what I hesitantly refer to as a date. It wasn't really a date, it was something. Anyway, so it was a disaster. psychologically, it was like one of those French thrillers. It was just awful, tense, unsatisfactory resolution, everything shot in black and white. Anyway, I phoned Maureen the next morning. Now, who is Maureen? Was she my therapist? No. Was she my psychiatrist? No. Was she my doctor? No. Was she the head of a vast corporation? No. Well, who was Maureen? Maureen was 18 years or so sober. She'd been an Al-Anon for 1,000 years. And she was a housewife from Rains Park in South London. And I told her the situation. She said, rip up the number, throw it away. If he calls, don't answer. And I said, okay. And I just did what I was told. My first sponsor, Doug, who now runs some kind of organic farm somewhere. That's what sponsors always end up doing eventually, either that or yoga teachers. Those seem to be the two main outcomes. Anyway, he was the organic farm type. He was maybe 10 years sober at the time, and he was about 10 years older than me. And a few months in, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was so surrendered. I just did what I was told without realizing I was even doing as I was told. And Doug used to call me Princess. That was my little nickname. I did have a suspicion that he wasn't entirely sure what my actual name was, so just used the epithet Princess just to be safe, but that's just conjecture. I was round at his house, sitting on the floor in the corner. I had trouble with chairs when I got sober. I was much more comfortable on the floor, or under tables, or under chairs, or in cupboards, or just hiding generally. I wasn't all that well wrapped when I got sober. So small spaces were safe somehow. Anyway, I was sitting on the floor in the corner, writing my step 4, and the door rang at my sponsor's house. And he was like getting on with whatever. I was just like left in the corner like there's a ring on the door, and these people come in. Oh, have I lost you? Oh, there you are. Okay, so there's a ring at the door. These people come in. They're Americans, very tall, very confident, shiny teeth, and they're chatting away. They're friends from Washington, D.C. And he was American, Doug. And they say they suddenly realize there's this weird creature sitting in the corner scribbling. And they said, that? And Doug said, oh, that's just Princess. She does everything she's told. And I remembered that because I got an insight into how I looked from the outside. I felt terrible, but I was doing as I was told. So he told me to do the steps, so I did. I didn't really ask what they were. I wouldn't give you tuppence for my first step 4. I think it covered like 7 or 8 pages. It wasn't a masterly analysis of anything, but it was as true and honest as I was capable of being at the time. And it kind of got the big luggage out of the way. There's been some hand luggage later that I've needed to deal with, but the big stuff got dealt with. And the point is that in step 1, what I say to myself is, left to my own devices, I will drink. If I drink, I may never come back. You have a solution to staying sober. It's worked for all of you, so it will work for me. There's no need, in my experience, to get super theological in step 2 and to worry about the nature of God and why. I mean, there's always the fashionable one of the moment, why Syria? Why, if there is a loving God, then how can this happen? How can that happen? And those are theological questions. If you're interested, go and do a course on theology. That's where they discuss that kind of stuff. It's of academic interest. What matters in step 2 is Bobby and Susan and Carol are horrible drunks, but they're sober, 2, 5, and 19 years respectively. Again, Maureen, enter stage left. I say to her, I get her hostage on the phone on a Saturday evening, somewhere around this time, 28 years ago. And I said, I said to her, this is before I did my step 4. I said, Maureen, I don't think I'm going to be able to do a step 4. And she said, why? And she said, because I can only adequately express myself through the medium of poetry. And seemed true at the time. And she said, you're a common or garden variety alcoholic. Don't you forget it. And of course, I wanted to report her. But who do you report anyone to? My own sponsor doesn't have a complaints department. So there we go. But the point is, it works for all of them. Why wouldn't it work for you? The only reason why AA wouldn't work for me is if I remain in charge. So step 3, just get on with it. You'll be fine. That's really, to me, what step 3 says. Get on with it. You'll be fine. Mind your own business. Keep your mouth shut. Keep it in the day. Go to a meeting. If that doesn't work, go to another meeting. Have a little notebook with all the tools of the program that people have given you. Keep it with you at all times. When you've got a problem, read the notebook, remind yourself, and do what it says. It's not super complicated. I've complicated the bejesus out of this over the years. And maybe I needed to, so that's not to beat myself up or to beat anyone up who is currently in a complicated phase. You may be in just the right place, but I'm going to report to you what simplicity looks like after all these years. So the big book is where they hid the instructions. They didn't tell me this initially, but that's where at the time, this was in the early 90s, if you wanted to learn about the steps, you'd go to a step meeting, and at step meetings, they talked about the 12 and 12, which is a great piece of writing, in parts, opinion, and it's got some wonderful spiritual tips and lessons and insights. It's amazing, but it doesn't contain the nuts and bolts of how to do individual steps. There is some great stuff I find useful on 10 and 11, and some wonderful stuff on 12. The other steps, and 8, a few phrases there are very helpful. But they don't have the instructions. The instructions, everything up to 63, is essentially preparing you to dive into the program. I've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to try and keep this focused on a few useful things rather than trying to cover everything. I think the program falls once you take step 3, then you're into the program proper. Everything before that is preparation. You've got 2 projects which are separate projects. Project 1 is cleaning up the mess of your life, steps 4 through 9. Project number 2 is get through till bedtime without having a drink or throwing yourself down the stairs or pushing anyone else down the stairs. You got that? 2 separate projects. Sort your whole life out and not die today. 2 projects. Steps 10, 11, and 12 is the how not to die today, like while you're quietly, slowly dealing with the rest of your life in 4 through 9. So 4 through 9. The 4 through 9 side of it, very soon starts to give me solutions to major problems in my life. People think that the inventory in step 4 starts on page 63, and I don't think it does. Again, heresy, contention. I think it starts on page 67, where it says, what were my mistakes? Because up until then, I'm examining everything that everyone else has done wrong and why I think I'm a victim of it. And then it's got some prayers and like how to get over it. And the reason why, while I'm pointing the finger at you, I can't look at me honestly. I've got to be at peace before I can look at myself honestly. So I think the first inventory question is not to say that you don't have to do the stuff before that. I think that's all preparation. The first inventory question is, what were my mistakes? And in a sense, there's a sex inventory, there's a fear inventory, but there are only 8 questions, and those 8 questions kind of all cover the same ground. What were my mistakes? Where was I selfish? Where was I self-seeking? Where was I frightened? Where was I dishonest? Where was I to blame? 7th question, where was I at fault? The faults, question 7, my faults, my character defects leads into step 7. The 8th question on page 67, where was I wrong? Where did I wrong other people? Leads into step 8. Very neat little thing there. But the interesting thing is, between pages 63 and 67, it gives me an adequate and complete solution to any emotional upset under any circumstances whatsoever for the rest of my life. The program starts on page, let me repeat that, let's just put this into context. The program starts on page 63. By the time you get to page 67, you have a solution to all upset. You wouldn't know that that was the case from going to meetings sometimes. So I'm going to explain how I use that. What I discover, you see, a resentment, I think, is any situation where I think I'm upset because something around me, you, them, the world, the laws of physics, the past, history, whatever it is, or even in the future, it says hurt or threaten. Something is being hurt or threatened. Something is not the way I think it should be. And so I'm unhappy and it's your fault. That's the basic idea behind all resentment. Whether if you analyze one resentment, you'll find out beneath it is this simple idea. If this were different, I'd be okay. If you analyze another 100 resentments, you know what? The message is going to be the same. The reason I think to analyze it a few is to realize it's like in Winnie the Pooh, where it's Eeyore's birthday, and Winnie the Pooh and Piglet decide that they're going to take Eeyore some presents. And Winnie the Pooh takes him some honey, but he starts to worry that the honey might actually be cheese. So he takes a bite out of the top to make sure that it's not cheese, and it is indeed honey. So, but then he worries that the next layer down might contain cheese, right? And by the time he's checked and checked and checked, it was honey all the way down. And resentments are the same. From the first resentment, I discover I'm unhappy because I believe if this were different, I'd be okay. If I analyze 100,000 resentments, the answer is always going to be the same. So another heresy, I don't analyze my resentments anymore. I get rid of them. I zap them. The way I do that is, well, first of all, I'm not unhappy because this thing isn't the way that I want it to be. Have you ever noticed when you get your own way, you just find something else to be upset about? If you're minded to be upset about something, you'll find something. I'm sure I've worked in offices where some people are fine, whatever happens, and some people are unhappy, whatever happens. And the people who are unhappy, whatever happens, always have a really good case. But anyone can make a case. So my resentments are not about you or them. The reason I'm resentful when I'm resentful is because I get a kick out of it, because for once it's your fault, not mine. So the way I get rid of resentment with the program is I say, number one, if people are behaving badly, they're driven by forces within them which are more powerful than them. That's what, to me, spiritual sickness is. The same as me. when I do bad stuff, it's not because I'm a bad person. It's just because I'm badly programmed and running on autopilot. So I extend that observation to other people. I come down off the judgment seat because no one put me there but me. I'm no position to judge, to moralize anyone else's so-called bad behavior. Most things that bother me are not other people's bad behavior anyway. It's just people getting on with their lives. They just look at things differently. How dare they? Or they have different values than me, or they're just in my way. Or just because. And that's how you really understand what resentment is about, when you realize they've done nothing wrong, but you're still angry with them. It's because I want to be angry, you see. So I recognize that, you know what, even when I get my own way, I'm not happy. So the idea I'm unhappy because my demands are not being met is untrue. Just untrue. If I drop the demand, I can be happy whether or not the demand is being met. So I drop the demand, I drop the moralization, I recognize they're just like me. And then here's the trick, that prayer. This person is a sick person, or this person is another child of God. How can I be helpful to them? God save me from being angry because I'm the one in trouble. I will be done. God will show me how to take a kindly and tolerant view. So the fact is, my experience is that getting over all upset and resentment is a matter of willingness and effort to redirect my attention back to my usefulness towards others. Then I'm in a position to be at peace, to reconnect with other people, to reconnect with the higher power. Fear is a kind of little subset of resentment. And to get rid of fear, some people talk about learning to live with fear. Well, you can do that. I don't want to anymore. I have to live with the fact that fear keeps knocking on the door. That's going to happen. And I'm dumb enough to say, come on in. But here's the thing, you know, the ego, resentment, fear, it's like vampires. They can only come in once you invite them. A few months ago, I was really upset about something. I've forgotten what now. You see, it works. I was upset about something, and I said to my other half, bad move. I said to my other half, why does this upset me so much? And he said, because you let it. There you go. Fear. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? It's the big book. It's very clever. It doesn't want us to go down a rabbit hole. So it asks a question. Why do we have these fears? Page 68. Why do we have these fears? And just before anyone can answer, Bill answers in the form of a rhetorical question. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Now, that's not really a question. What we're supposed to say is, aha, that is the answer. Self-reliance fails. So what does that mean? Now, people analyze it different ways. What it means to me is this. Self is this picture of me I've got as a physical body running around the world with an identity, with a nationality, with an ethnicity, with a social background, with a religion, with aptitudes, with character defects, with interests, with aversions, with all of those things which I think go to make up me. Psst, they're not me. Those are the clothes that I'm wearing, right? That's not me. If you'd taken like the physical genetic me and lifted me up and dropped me in, you know, on the 16th of September 1971 in a village in Kazakhstan, I would be thinking and feeling and doing very, very different things and have a completely different identity. Would the spirit still be me? I think so. When I was 7, there are stories about, a few things I remember when I was 7. You know what? I'm exactly the same person. you know, intolerant, vain, showy offy, just obnoxious. I'm being silly, but those are those when I act out, that's how I do it. I I act out the same that when I act out, it's exactly the same as when I was 7. My spirit is the same. I meet people from you know, when you get to a certain age, you can meet people from 45 years ago, 50 years, whatever. It's the same person, you know, it's the same person. They may be operating in the world very differently. My beliefs, my thinking, my behavior can change, but I don't have to change me. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. I'm spirit. Maybe I've existed all of eternity, and maybe I will exist for all of eternity. The data aren't in on that. We can't prove it. But what is obvious is I am not my body, my circumstances, my history, my so-called personality, none of those things. Now, the reason fear is connected to this is if I think those things, I'm screwed, because those things can be hurt, damaged, threatened, turned upside down. Your life can turn on a sixpence. If I think I'm those things, I'm going to be frightened, and it's impossible not to be. And you can't use God as a magic talisman to kind of protect you from bad things happening, because things are going to happen. Where God comes in is my identity, my value, and my purpose. If who I am is spirit, like God is the source and we are extensions of that as spirit, what happens on the stock market, whether my clients like me or not, whether I'm drummed out of my home group, whether I get attacked in the street, whether my cooker blows up, none of those things affect who I am, my identity, my value. My favorite phrase for this is I'm of infinite worth just because I exist. I don't need to do anything to acquire that, and nothing I do can take away from that. And that's true for everyone, even, and then you insert your hit list, even those people are of infinite worth just because they exist. There is a person behind the behavior and the personality. There's a principle behind the personality. And that can't be hurt by anything. And my purpose, I'm going to steal something from someone else because he expressed it so well, a speaker from North America who said, we're like giant magnets which are dragged through the junkyard of life. And all of this crap gets stuck to us. And we think we're all of this metallic wreckage which is stuck to us, but it's not. It's what's stuck to us. And the job of steps 4 through 9 is to demagnetize us so all of the crap falls off and we find out who we are. And he then goes on to say, rather surprisingly, he says, then you find out what you are. You're a lamp. So my purpose is just to be, you know what, I don't even have to do anything except accept the release from all of the rubbish in my head. And I just need to be myself. That's literally it. That's how the light comes through us to other people. I think it's just by being ourselves. Now, once that's the case, there's nothing to be frightened of, because my value is intact, my identity is intact, my purpose is intact, and there's nothing to do. So 10, 11, and 12, I'm going to finish on this. It's very simple. My job is I've got to look after myself. I've got to be having fun. We're on God's amusement park planet, so let's act like it. But in between those things, I'm here just to be useful to whoever needs and wants help. And I don't really care whether it's in AA or outside AA. I just do what's in front of me. I ask God in the morning, hey, what shall I do? And then I do it. And then I say in the evening, hey, is there anything I need to do differently tomorrow? Pick one thing, write it down. That's kind of it. I've got a boringly simple program. I've talked enough, so I'm really looking forward to hearing other people speak. Thank you so much for inviting me.